DOJ's case against Tornado Cash developer Roman Storm. The latest development here was a letter filed recently from Roman's defense attorneys saying recent disclosures in another similar case have raised concerns that prosecutors misled the judge or were otherwise playing fast and loose. Break this down for all of us non-lawyer minds. What does this mean?
Okay, so I will just say, as somebody who has been both a federal prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney, I've been spending my time over the last decade fighting the government and making similar allegations. You're at a tremendous disadvantage when you're in the defense side. I mean, the government usually has all the cards, and the prosecutors, have a lot of advantages. One of the things that the defense has, of course, is the ability to raise questions and lodge issues. And it's, I'd say, not surprising that the defense team here has some very capable, well-known, I would say, defense counsel, is trying to challenge disclosures made by the government. It's very important on the defense side to knock the prosecution down a peg. Because in court, the judge assumes or presumes that the prosecution has their stuff together and they know what they're doing, and they're on the side of truth, justice, and the American way. And so it's always important to do that. And I think the defense is usually in the strongest position to do that when they're talking about disclosures and evidence that's been withheld and things like that. So that's often a defense motion you see in well litigated cases.
Okay, so business as usual, right?
Right.
We're
Pretty
going to hear
much.
from the defense as much as I'm sure is possible before the trial begins in July. Now, my question here for you is, a lot of people in the industry are watching this trial closely. A lot of firms in the industry and big thought leaders like Vitalik Buterin supporting Roman Storm's defense financially. What happens if the DOJ wins this case against Roman Storm? What does that mean for innovation in the United States? Does it mean anything?
Well, the fear that people have, just to articulate that, right, is that you're criminalizing software development, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think you and I have discussed that a little bit offline. And that is a legitimate concern. I had represented a software developer in a case against the DOJ, and that was the concern there. He wasn't the one engaged in the criminal activity. He's just creating tools, right? So, if you're just creating a hammer, you're not responsible for someone bludgeoning someone else over the head with the hammer, so to speak. Um, there is, I think that is a legitimate concern. I think the reason that I was able to beat the DOJ in that case, but that this case is more challenging, is that it's harder to articulate what the legitimate uses are for the crypto mixer. And I think the DOJ here in the Southern District of New York is going to take on that issue very directly. And they are alleging that the defendants knew that there was all sorts of illicit proceeds that were running through Tornado Cash, including sort of North Korean, stolen Bitcoin and so forth. Whether that, I don't know whether that's true or not. They're just allegations. The government's got to prove all that beyond a reasonable doubt. But a jury is not going to like that stuff. And it's going to be harder for the defense to articulate why you need anonymized transactions when the point of a blockchain is so that things aren't anonymized. And so, why use a blockchain and have an anonymity, which is sort of cuts against the idea of the blockchain?
And so I've heard both sides of this argument, right? And I think that the argument to that would be, you know, Tornado Cash is a privacy tool. It's to protect your transactions, much like I can't go to your bank account, Renato, and see the transactions that you're making. Tornado Cash is there to kind of provide a similar solution in an environment that is more open than the financial environment that came before it. Do you think that stands up in a trial like this or is able to convince a jury to see the other side?
I don't know all the evidence,
Mhm.
but I'm skeptical that a jury is going to find that compelling. Jurors usually side with the government anyway. I'll just tell you, as somebody who's gone up against the government quite a bit, they tend to think the government's right, and they're not going to like what's going on here. I'm sure the given some of the allegations in the indictment, that the government's going to talk about all the North Korean bad guys and so forth. No one's going to like that in the jury. But I think that there are all sorts of ways to engage in private transactions, right? You just named them, right? Like one. I mean, most of our financial transactions are private. The reason you go to crypto is actually so you have visibility, right, regarding the transactions, as part of, I think, the feature of it. I think that I think that even if you take credit what you just said, I think another problem is going to be for the defendants here is the allegation. Whether they can prove it or not, I don't know. But if the government's able to prove that they knew that there was illicit money going through this, that's hard, and a jury's going to have trouble going away from that. I mean, there are, for example, an analogous type of business, Jen, are these email providers that have like encrypted email and advertise that they don't cooperate with law enforcement and all of this sort of stuff for your privacy. Well, you could argue that that's totally legitimate service, but if the government can prove that they're knowingly aiding people who are engaged in criminal activity, then it becomes harder. And that knowledge is, I think, a really key element for the government.
Okay, and so I'm kind of going to ask something I already asked, but in a different way. I want you to drive it home here for me. If the DOJ wins, is precedent set in some way? Because we don't have market structure bill yet, where now anyone who's building something that maybe could enable someone to do something bad is now a target, or at the very least makes them afraid, makes them want to take their innovation overseas.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really smart question, and I maybe I didn't answer it well enough the first time.
Mhm.
Here's what I would say: that if you're creating if you have or are creating a crypto mixer company, you have a very significant risk. You have a risk here, a criminal risk. You have potential regulatory risks. You have potential criminal risks at the state level. You have potential litigation risks from others, and so forth. I would say there's a lot of, you should be cautious and concerned about those risks. If there's a win here, that risk is heightened because it may embolden prosecutors, whether in this administration, I don't know, but perhaps in a future administration or at the state level, to prosecute cases like this. But I will say this, Jen. Even if the defense wins in this particular case because they're just good lawyers, or they can outduel the DOJ, that doesn't, I think, do away with some of those risks that I talked about a minute ago. And I would still consider this to be a business model that has to be careful about the risks that they face, both in criminal and civil liability.
So the risks are more, what it's sounding like, applied to that type of business, maybe not more generally applied to anyone developing anything in crypto.
I think that's right.
Yeah. All right. And I guess the last thing I wanted to hear your thoughts on this topic was, are you surprised that the DOJ is moving forward with this? And I ask you that because just months ago, I believe that crypto task force that the DOJ had was dismantled. They were really told to deprioritize crypto related enforcement. And we're seeing this kind of moving ahead full steam. I can imagine by your previous answers that it has to do with the type of business and probably the evidence that the government has.
Right. I don't know the evidence,
Mhm.
and so I keep bracketing that. Okay.
I
I'm looking
know.
at the allegations that the government's made. But a difference between this and a lot of the other enforcement matters is that this is a criminal indictment that's based, really on actual harm to real victims, which is something that the Trump administration has really emphasized, right? Is that harm to victims is important. Like I mentioned the North Korean allegations. That's something that is the sort of thing that I imagine some folks in the Justice Department right now, don't want to be seen as supporting and want to be seen as being tough on. And given that the administration has been um, friendly towards and facilitating the growth of the crypto space, I think it's even more important when there are actual criminals and wrongdoers, obviously in this case just alleged and not proven, that the government is going to do, what it can to throw the books at those people.